The Ellis Island of the West. This is Angel Island, a mystically fascinating island about 1.2 square miles large, located in the San Francisco Bay. Now a beautifully preserved state park, Angel Island once served as the main entry point for nearly 1 million immigrants from 1910 to 1940. Before Angel Island was designated as the principal port of entry for foreigners arriving in the western United States, the port of San Francisco was being used to process immigrants. When the Commissioner General of Immigration had inspected the San Francisco immigration facilities, he was extremely disturbed and alarmed by the conditions that he saw. He explained, quote, "These quarters are so disgraceful, cramped in dimensions, lacking in every facility for cleanliness and decency, that it is necessary to insist upon an immediate remodeling." The new area to replace the inadequate port of San Francisco was to be the government-controlled land of Angel Island, where both immigration requirements and quarantine regulations could be enforced. After the project had been plagued with budget cuts and was immensely delayed by the monstrous earthquake of 1906, the Angel Island Immigration Station had finally opened on January 22, 1910. Only those who were officials, merchants and their families, students, and legitimate travelers would be allowed to get off in San Francisco when they arrived in the United States. All other immigrants would travel to Angel Island via the Angel Island Ferry to be inspected by immigration officials. For most immigrants, the process was relatively quick and trouble-free. Most immigrants were cleared within a matter of days and headed back to San Francisco to start their new lives. However, for some immigrants, mainly the Chinese, the process was excruciatingly long and filled with discriminatory processes. Many Chinese immigrants were forced to undergo traumatic interrogations by a board of 3 immigration officials. These officials asked Chinese immigrants senseless questions such as, how many steps were there at the front of your house? Or, of what material was the flooring in the bedroom of your house? So they could compare the answers they were given with the answers of their relatives to see if they both matched. Those whose answers did not match were ordered to be deported, but thankfully there was a reasonably easy appeal process that was usually successful. Immigrants who had to stay on the island until they were authorized to go back to San Francisco spent the majority of their time in the administration building, which was destroyed in 1940, and the detention barracks. There were also exercise yards that the immigrants could spend short periods of time in during the day. The living conditions were far from acceptable. The treatment of the immigrants who stayed on Angel Island is a dark part of the island's history. Because the living quarters were completely overcrowded with people and large iron bunks, there were no chairs. The sanitary conditions were absolutely appalling, with few janitorial staff and hardly enough toilets for the hordes of people who needed access to them. Interestingly enough, the floors of the bathrooms were angled away from the drains, resulting in disastrous problems. In this one room, there would be as many as 60 or more people crowded together. Even the quality of the food was poor, to say the least. In 1925, troops from Fort McDowell, the military outpost on the island, were called to the immigration station to stop a food riot that had gotten out of control. People spent their long hours here waiting and worrying, reading, gambling if they had any money, and talking. Thanks to a number of non-profit organizations and community volunteers, such as the Chinese YMCA and the Japanese Association of America, immigrants who were detained on the island were presented with a number of donations and gifts. These organizations aim to make life on the island more bearable for those immigrants who patiently waited to be free. Fascinating scriptures of poetry can be seen etched into a number of different walls inside the detention barracks. This poetry was one of the most powerful ways immigrants could express themselves while they waited to be cleared. Many poems express frustration while others indicate feelings of intense anger. These two particular poems are by far the most important to the immigration station as a state park. After the destruction of the administration building in 1940, the station was shut down and eventually planned on being demolished. A man who was part of the survey crew walked inside these detention barracks and stumbled upon these magnificently carved poems. Being a San Francisco State student, he rushed to the American Studies department and notified them of this amazing find. The area was deemed culturally and historically significant and was not demolished.